As you all, the Trump elections happened, and that was a big turning point in my life, as I'm sure it was for a lot of you. At that time, it wasn't as big on the news as it is now, but there were still ICE raids happening. And I remember like my mom and I going to Home Depot and sitting in the parking lot, noticing for the first time that there were these unmarked officers in front of the doors. And my mom just like was trembling in the car, and I was just holding her hand and I didn't know what to do. And we ended up turning away and going back home. But I think that was a time period where like suddenly going into public spaces became such a terrifying task. Oh my gosh, sorry guys, I did not think I was gonna get this emotional. But
You're totally fine.
yeah, and there were times, like I was still a high school student in 2016, and our classes would have debates and discussions about whether or not undocumented students should be able to have like in-state tuition or be able to go to university. And my peers didn't know I was undocumented. So I would be like sitting in class hearing what their opinions were. And so as it was for many of you, like it was a very difficult time kind of transitioning from living like a typical American life to trying to graduate and focus on that one achievement. So that kind of became my goal, was to take it day by day. And thankfully in 2017, we got to it and I graduated high school. When we graduated, my friends were all posting, where they were going to school and how they were excited for this new chapter of their life. And at that time, I had decided, after many, many thoughts and discussions, that there wasn't really opportunity for me in the States. My family couldn't afford to send me to school. And so eventually my mom and I silently left the country, and I couldn't tell my closest friends that I wouldn't be able to come back for a while, and things like that. So that was kind of the way out. And my mom came with me because she didn't want her daughter kind of leaving the country for the first time, being on her own. So my mom and I left. My dad and my sister were in the States, my sister finishing up high school, my dad working. And I didn't know when I would be able to recross the borders to see them again. So after high school, I self-deported to Korea, which is where, as I mentioned earlier, I was born. I had no idea what I was doing in Korea when I first got there. I ended up applying for medical school, somehow got in, and I realized very quickly that even though it was my home country, it was just culturally so distant from me, and I never felt at home. I was really struggling with just adapting to society there, and my body just kind of expressed that I was breaking down through stress by getting shingles. So I ended up going to the hospital a few times, and it was very clear at that point that I just could not stay in Korea, even though I am Korean, even though my citizenship is in Korea. It just wasn't working out. So that's kind of how I ended up looking into Canada, as I couldn't go back to the States. So on this map here, circled is the province of Alberta, which is where I'm located. And if you've never heard of it, I didn't know anything about it before I looked into it either. But this is kind of what it looks like. Of course, I'm showing all the really nice pictures of the nature. These are all photos that I took. And so I've seen the Northern Lights here. You've got the Canadian side of the Rocky Mountains, and the winters are kind of crazy. I actually thought it so funny that Jazmin and I both sent in photos of us wearing winter jackets for our headshots. That is very real in Canada, but better to show the reality. And so after 4 years of undergraduate studies, doing my Bachelor of Science in Nursing, I finally graduated, and am currently working as a NICU and Peds Cardiac ICU nurse. I've been doing that for the last 3 years, and some days I still like wake up wondering how the heck I'm in Canada and made it to this stage, but definitely through the love and support of friends and family. And then I also work as a research assistant currently on access to immunizations from an intersectional kind of perspective. Um, yeah, so this is something I'm doing right now and hoping to transition a little bit more into and go back to school eventually. But overall, my journey of self-deportation, I think that decision was the hardest decision I've had to make because it was something that would change the course of the future, not just for myself, but for my family. And it also meant that my family had to be, split in 3 different countries at one point, not knowing when we could reunite. So it was the hardest decision of my life, but it was the best decision because now, as you can see on the right side, my family and I can see each other whenever. We're free to travel and do so in a way that we're not scared anymore. And then I also met my partner here, who's a huge hockey fan. So I thought I'd put that photo in there as well. So yeah, that's kind of a quick little summary of my journey. I'd love to connect with anyone who is interested in coming to Canada and talk a little bit more. I know there's limited time here, but feel free to reach out to me. There's my email and Instagram as well. Yeah, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share. And I look forward to hearing from the other panelists as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate it and we love the story. I really liked all your pictures. Now for Jazmin. Let me see if I can pin you.
As I was listening to your story, we have such similar stories. There's just so much in common. You'll see as I start talking about myself, I'm like, wow, it feels like we had a very similar trajectory. Thank you so much for sharing. As you started tearing up, I was like, uh-oh, like here it comes. Like I get so emotional thinking about it too, especially with other people who are going through this and have gone through it, understand how hard this is. My story, very similar. I'm originally from Mexico. I left the Mexico when I was 3 years old as well. So my family immigrated to the US. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then that's really where everything started. I would say that where, mm, sorry, I realize I'm not sharing screen. One sec. Okay. Hmm. So my family left Mexico when we were really young, and mostly it was because I came from a very poor family. So they wanted to try to provide a better future for myself and eventually for my siblings who were not yet in the picture. And they ended up moving us to the state of Wisconsin, like I mentioned. I didn't know I was undocumented when I was growing up, like kindergarten, elementary school. That's not something I really registered. I just thought I was another individual just because I really couldn't remember even coming to the States. I knew I was born in Mexico, but I really didn't remember much of the move. And growing up in Wisconsin, I feel like it really shaped me from early on, just because as I got older, I began to see the limitations that being undocumented would provide for me. So, not being able to drive because I couldn't get a driver's license, the idea of paying out of state tuition, even though I had grown up in the state, and then just knowing the hard road ahead if I did try to pursue higher education because my family didn't have much money. And something I also share sometimes is that for me, when the undocumented kind of weight really began to weigh on me was when I was in high school, because that's when I really became aware of my status and what my life would unfold following that. But I think the biggest event that really influenced my decision to leave and just planted the idea at that point, not really saying where I was going to go, but more so just planted a seed that eventually something would have to change. Is my father, he was actually detained and he was deported. So that was really traumatic for me as a child and for my family. Oh, I'm getting emotional too. Sorry. So as that influenced, so having lived through that so early on in high school, I felt like I never had peace because I was always afraid that I was next. Because I always thought if someone so close to me, like my very own father, was detained and deported, I felt like I was next too. So I had to latch onto something. I needed something to believe that I was going to be able to get through it because it was really, really hard. It was really, really dark in those days. So for me, that was education. I thought in my mind, I created this narrative that if I work really hard and I go to college, somehow my undocumented status is going to resolve itself. I don't know how that exactly was going to play out, but I told myself that was what was going to happen. So I was really, really lucky. Well, not so lucky. I just really threw myself in school and being really focused and trying to be involved in as many activities as I could and trying to defy the odds of someone who was undocumented, first gen, low income, and just everything that was put in my path that told me that I couldn't keep going. I did it anyways, just because I thought that going to college was my way out. Again, that in my mind is what I needed to believe in order to keep going, even though I know now as an adult that that wasn't it. That wasn't like the end of the story for me. So I ended up going to do as much as I could, as Yuna mentioned in her story, trying to really live that traditional teenage American life, college-bound student. So I tried to do as many sports, as many extracurriculars, really try to involve myself in that college-ready profile of a student. And then eventually that really helped me graduate fourth in my class, and that opened opportunities for me. And that eventually allowed me to go to University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is where I went. I was very fortunate to have a full tuition scholarship, which was the only way I was able to afford being able to go to college. Otherwise, I just couldn't. At that time, I was with a single mother because my father was no longer in the picture, and I had three younger siblings. So there was just no funds available to pay for my education. This is when I really committed to school. I was working full time while I was going to school full time, just because although my tuition was covered, every other expense was still on me. So I had to really make it through. And I will say that it was really, really hard. There was a point, it was during when I was in undergrad, that Trump was elected for his first term. And that was really traumatic for me because all those feelings of not feeling safe and the possibility of being detained and deported really just came back. And I will say that I did not do very well for a full year while in school. So I really felt really angry and hopeless and confused and lost. I just felt all the feelings. It was as I started to go to my junior year that that's when the idea that I really have to go or something has to change is really when that entered my mind for many reasons. For having experienced having a parent detained and deported, the exclusions from DACA, and seeing how the changes, the lives of my peers who were also undocumented were changing, feeling like I was stuck, and also feeling like that shelter and that narrative that I had created for myself of education being my way out, starting to see that that's actually not my way out. Like that wasn't going to change. Graduating wasn't going to make me a permanent resident. I was still going to be undocumented. And all of those feelings were really overwhelming, very discouraging. And that's when I really started to think about that idea of leaving. But it was not um like a one day, like you mentioned earlier, a one day I woke up and I'm leaving, just because I had never heard of someone who had left to somewhere that wasn't their birth country. So I didn't think it was even possible. But eventually, through a lot of just believing in myself, just taking a leap of faith, and really just feeling like I was a little bit crazy, but I was going to do it anyways, is that I decided that it was time for me to go. And with that, I knew that there was just more reasons for me to go than for reasons for me to stay. There was just so many little compounding things that had added up throughout the years to make me feel like I didn't want to be there anymore. And I just felt like that was the end of the road for me. But I knew that I didn't necessarily want to go back to Mexico. I wanted to try to go somewhere else. So when I was deciding about what to do, I considered, well, obviously my birth country, it's always there. But because I left Mexico so young, I just didn't feel very comfortable culturally. I am a Spanish speaker, but I just don't feel like that fluidity that I have with English. I just didn't feel like I had a strong enough relationship with my family still there to feel like that could be a source of um, support while I was there. And then I also didn't have work experience that I could leverage to try to immigrate somewhere as a worker. So that's when I leaned into the study permit as a potential way to immigrate to another country. And when I was deciding where to go, there was Canada was always in the mix, but also Norway. I ended up deciding to go with Canada just because even though I knew I wasn't going to be able to come back to the US because of my bar. I just felt like the idea of being distance-wise closer to my family was something that I really needed to feel like I wasn't alone, because when I moved to Canada, I didn't have any family or friends, but I wanted to believe that my family was, just a few hours away, which they technically are, even though I can't go over there. So all of that led to my decision to pursue a study permit, and that's what brought me here to Canada. And that's actually all I have for this portion. This is a recycled slide deck.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed your story. So now we'll have Dr. Hignio Fernandez share his story, and we'll move on to the questions after that.
So now I feel really bad because my slides are not as good as my colleagues. But to be fair, I'm like extremely busy these days. But yeah, I'll go very quickly because I know a lot of people have many questions, and I think we're gonna be engaging in that. So I was born in Veracruz, Mexico, and came to Tyler, Texas, which is a city close to Dallas, Texas. And I grew up undocumented here. And so it didn't really hit, the undocumented part until I was like a teenager, right? When you're, want to get a driver's license, you want to get to work and that sort of stuff. I am the youngest of four, so I didn't really have anyone to look up to in terms of like going to school. So I wanted initially to be going to law school, and that's what I thought I was gonna do. But in high school, I shadowed an attorney and he sucked. And so when I went back to the counselor in high school, I was like, you know what? I don't think I really want to go to law school because I spent this day with this person and he was he was bad. Now, as an adult, I look back and I think it wasn't law, it was the person. And I'm not judging the person because a lot of things could have been going on in his life, like a divorce or whatever. So it was just not a good experience. And so the counselor said, you have one other option. There's a nurse practitioner that you can shadow. Now, at this point, I had no clue what a nurse did. And so I shadowed a nurse practitioner at this community health clinic, which is still in Tyler. It's called Bethesda. And she was amazing. And I thought, oh yeah, I can be a nurse practitioner too. So I went to community college, and once I finished community college, I wanted to go into nursing school, but I couldn't because I needed to have a background check. Of course, I couldn't because I didn't have a social. So a counselor misinformed me and said, oh, there's a lot of people who come on study permits. Maybe you can get one, you can go back and get one. And I said, okay, why not? I was young and not very smart. I was 21. My parents were kind of shaky. I ended up going back to Mexico. Of course, when I went to the embassy, they said, we can't give you a study permit because you literally grew up here undocumented. So that's one of the questions that some people ask. So once you self-deport, if you are older than 18 years, if you've been undocumented for at least a year in the US, you will be barred for 10 years. And that's how long I was barred for. I don't know about Jazmin and Eunah, but they'll be able to tell you too. And so I was there from 2009 all the way to 2019. Now, during that time, if I look back, I'll start crying, just like Eunah and Jazmin. But now that I'm here, it is one of the best things that I could have done because I feel successful, and I've been able to do a lot of the things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I had stayed in the States. For one, I wouldn't have been able to go into nursing school. And then, of course, DACA came in 2012, so I could have been a DACA recipient myself. And so, but I wasn't because I left. So I went to Mexico for 10 years. I got my BSN. I got a master's degree. I was able to travel to Europe like 3 or 4 times. During my master's degree, I had a research placement in Toronto in Canada. And the person that was my mentor became my friend. And when I said, okay, I'm ready for my PhD, she recommended University of Alberta, which is in the same province where Eunah lives, actually the same city and the same school. where effective yesterday, I started my adjunct professor assistant there. In addition to the role that I have now at UT Health Houston. And so in 2019, I moved to Canada, to University of Alberta, started my PhD. So here I have an associate's from Tyler Junior College in Texas, my BSN and my master's from Mexico, and then I moved to Canada for my PhD. Now, this one is the #1 nursing school in Canada and well, when I graduated, it was top 5 in the world. So it was a tough program to go through. Now, I was funded through the Mexican government. All my master and my PhD was all funded, so I have no student loans. And then in addition, the Canadian government gave me additional funds. So I am one of those people that have 0 student loans. So that's fantastic. There's money out there, you just have to be able to look for it. So it's interesting because when I moved to Canada in 2019, my 10-year bar was up. So as soon as I arrived to Canada, that same month, I went back to the embassy to get a visitor's visa for the US. And literally the officer was like tearing because he said, I can't believe this happened to you. But by that time, I was already used to Mexico. I learned how to speak the language well. I'm totally fluent in Spanish, speaking, writing, and reading, which were really tough at the beginning. I learned so much about my culture, and coming back to the US was not on my plans until, of course, mom got diagnosed with cancer, and things change, right? The people's life changed when those things happen. So I moved back to Texas in 2021 on a work permit. So they did give me the visitor's visa in 2019, and I was able to come back to Tyler on my mother's 60th birthday. So that was a very emotional, very powerful, that I've talked to and other places, which I will not go into detail because we'll all start crying. But it was one of the best things. And so in 2021, I came back to Texas. I now work as an assistant professor at the University of Texas in Houston. And I do migrant and health research. So I'm a researcher, full-time scientist. And through this work, I've been able, last year, I was invited to the White House, which doesn't usually happen to people. And of course, I won't be invited back at least for the next 4 years. And we all know why. But I'm very happy for the work that I do. And what feeds me every day, it's my research job. And then what takes my money away is the advocacy piece, which is the Yo Soy Migrante and East Texas Monarchs, because I spend a lot of time advocating and showing up. And I know it's not always just about immigration status, it's also about race, and it's about gender, because it's about how you look and all those things, right? And so for my work, I do HIV prevention and human trafficking prevention among immigrant populations. So if you follow our social media, I share some of that stuff on my personal social media. And so here are just some of the pictures of my current role. I give talks. Last week, I was in Maine, Portland. Last year, I was in Singapore. I've been all over the place. I've been to Colombia. And so again, I wouldn't necessarily advise people go back, like self-deport, go to your country, live the life, experience, because that's a tough thing to do. But if I tell you how I feel about my own experience, I would definitely say that is the best thing that could have happened to me. Because it just makes me who I am now. And I'm able to not only do the work that I do as a nurse scientist, but also be able to self-advocate, which is very important. And not everybody is able to do that because for many reasons, right? But also show up for my community and other communities, and I'm allies to so many others, people who are going through similar situations. And so that's just kind of a summary of my journey. And if it's okay, we can move to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hignio. I love hearing your story every time. So we will start with questions from what you guys put on the RSVP. There's a few. So this one was repeated several times, but did you need to learn French? I don't know if whoever wants to answer.
So no. So Canada, there's like the east where I think Jazmin is at. You will potentially need to learn French, but people speak English, but they prefer to speak French. But on the west, where Alberta is, for instance, nobody speaks French. Like very few people speak French, and everything's in English. It's just like being in the States, literally. And Alberta, it's very similar to Texas, like beef, big trucks, all this stuff.
Thank you. Next question is, when did you decide to exit and how much money did you save? This is a two-part, so it says, for the entire process, how much money did you spend?
I can share a little bit about my experience. Honestly, when I left, it was just the flight. And I mean, I was a teenager, so I had no savings. But it was just a flight back to my home country. And then I lived with my grandparents. And then that's where I started working and saving a little bit. I will say the cost of going to Canada, you'll have to pay international student fees. But as mentioned, like there's money, you just got to find ways to access it through scholarships and whatnot. So yeah, maybe that's a different answer for later, but there's ways you can do it.
Also, did you apply for a job? How long did you wait to go back to your home country? Which we kind of went over that. Okay, so I'm interested to immigrate into Canada. I don't have options yet. I'm not a professional, but I wish I could study in Canada. So let's see. Basically, what's your advice for someone who's studying right now and wants to move to Canada to continue their higher education?
So Canada has very friendly immigration policies. So this is something that the US doesn't have. So any international students, regardless of where you're coming from, but if you do a graduate degree in Canada, right after you finish, you can apply for this program where you can work for like maybe 1 or 3 years or something. And then during that time, you can apply for permanent residence. So that's something that the US does not have, and many other countries do not have. Like once you finish studying, you have to go back to your home country unless you get a job, right? And that's very difficult. But the way the Canadian system is that their way of thinking is if we are investing in your education, then it only makes sense that you stay in this country and contribute to our economy, right? So that a lot of people do that. A lot of international students go to Canada. They do a master's degree or PhD, and then they stay to work, and then they apply for their permanent residence. And it's like super easy.
Where do you start moving, and what are things you didn't think about until after you made the move? What was the hardest thing to do? I don't know if Jazmin, you want to answer this question?
The hardest, personally for me, it was saving up the funds because I didn't think at the time I didn't know anyone who had immigrated to Canada, so I didn't think it was even possible for me. So when I submitted an application, I wasn't expecting to be accepted, so I wasn't proactive of applying for scholarships as I was for undergrad. So definitely financially, that's something I always recommend people do, save up, because I was ill-equipped and it was really hard my first year. I forgot the second part of your question already.
So it says, where do you start moving? What are the things you didn't think about until after you left? Like, what was something you didn't think about, basically?
Something I didn't think about, how hard of an emotional toll it would take the first few months. I knew I prepared myself up to the move. I said my goodbyes to my family members, my friends, but it really hit really hard once I was here. Now, really acknowledging that it was a permanent move, that I couldn't see them, that they couldn't come here. I don't think I prepared myself as much as I should have for that. So it was really, really hard trying to be a graduate student while trying to deal with the emotional toll of it. I don't think I prepared myself too well for that part.
Next question is, when thinking about self-deporting, what are the pros and cons of making this decision? How was the process?
This is a question that I feel like no one can answer until you like really go through it. It's such a hard decision to make because it's just so much uncertainty, right? But in terms of pros and cons, I try to make a little slide. I'll just share my screen real quick. Okay, ignore that one, sorry. Okay, pros of self-deporting, I think learning about your own culture, if you do go to your home country, being able to reunite with your family and like see your family members that you might not even have been able to meet while you were living in the States. The freedom to travel anywhere. I know, Andrea, earlier you mentioned like seeing us travel. That is a luxury that I did not realize would be possible with self-deporting, just because you don't have to worry about like not being able to recross the US border. Feelings of safety, and then Canada's just very multicultural, and I feel like at least compared to Wisconsin where we grew up, it's, you know, you can have like a lot more diversity in terms of your day-to-day, the friends that you meet, the people you see, the celebrations you see, the places like, I don't know, just Canada is very safe, I feel like, and a lot of that has to do with it being multicultural. And then some of the cons of self-deporting. Yasmin talked about like the financial barriers. The nice thing with a Canadian study permit is you can work part-time while you're in full-time studies, and then you can work full-time over summer vacation. And so that's something that allowed me to keep up with paying for tuition. Homesickness and the emotional toll. But again, now you're free to see your family. And then this feeling of being behind or like you're starting over is something that I think I didn't really think about when I left, because when I came to Canada, I had to get, you know, a social insurance number. I had to get my health card and get all these documents like caught up again. And those are things that can take a little bit of time, but it's like the hard part in the beginning that once you overcome, it's such a smooth process after that. So yeah, I hope that answers a little bit of that question.
Thank you. Would one of you guys like to share anything else, or do you think she covered everything from the pros and cons?
No, I think she nailed it. The only thing I would add is that I would hope that everyone knows themselves and know if that would really work. Like deep inside, you know if that's gonna work based on how much you're gonna miss. Like when I think when the three of us left, we were younger, and you know, I can't look in the face and look at someone who already has kids, for instance, because that's a whole different story, right? Or if their parents are already older and they have to look out for them, then the experience is going to be different. But if you're like young and you know yourself, how you're going to handle the emotional toll, because I've seen a lot of people that leave and just go like downhill, right? Like, not, unfortunately, not all the stories are successful. We would want them to be, right? But they're not. So, and that has to do a lot with people's personalities and how well they work under pressure and with stress. Everything's going to be stressful, right? Because you're in a place you've never been, or haven't been in a long time. So you just kind of think about that.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is my last question, and then I'll get Matthew to answer the questions in the chat. But they want to know about housing in Canada, rent requirements, and budgeting in Canada. I don't know if anyone has more experience with the renting or housing in Canada that they would like.
I can start, and then, I mean, I'm sure we have some unique takes here. Personally, I found it quite difficult to navigate housing. I immigrated to Ontario. I should start there. So I've lived in 3 cities in Ontario, and now I live in Montreal, Quebec. And the hardest thing that I've struggled with is housing. So finding a place to live, competition was brutal. I mean, I'd be like one of hundreds of people trying to compete for a unit. So I did have to use Airbnb as like transitional housing many times, just staying in Airbnb a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then subleasing, taking over leases, breaking the leases. Housing has been really hard, but maybe that's just me in Ontario. Um, it's also been quite expensive in the last 2 years. I feel like rent prices have really gone up. Um, so that's by far been my biggest challenge. Financially, maybe this is again my experience on the Ontario side, but cost of living has also just really gone up. So I've seen the increased cost of groceries and then just eating out has gone up. But I think that is more of a supply chain issue in general. And I know people in the US see it too, but I think that as a young adult, financially, it can get a little hard, specifically within Ontario, but that's my take on this part of the country.
I guess just to add on to that, something that was helpful for me was looking into like on-campus residence housing. A lot of the times, international students are actually working as resident assistants, and so that's what I did all 4 years of my undergrad. Is I worked in residence to kind of cover the cost of paying for housing. And because you're on campus, there's so many more resources just for living on campus, and I find that to be kind of like um, worth it in terms of living in residence. But when I moved off campus, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. My sister and I shared a 1 bedroom apartment. I lived in like a tiny basement with 3 other people that was meant for one person. Like you got to do what you got to do. But I would say if housing, like if finances is a big issue, don't even look at Toronto or Vancouver. That's like your LA, New York, right? I'm biased, but Edmonton housing is, I think, pretty good.
Yeah, I think it has to do more with the province. Ontario and Vancouver are extremely expensive. I mean, they're known to be extremely expensive. But if you move to like Alberta, the province, things are cheaper. I think I pay like, it's still expensive, like 1,200 for a basement. That's meant for one person really, or maybe a couple or something, but it is pricey.
Thank you so much. Now for the questions in the chat. Matthew, I don't know if you would like to continue.
Yes, I'm gonna keep running with as many questions as I'm getting down. I see you guys are putting in more questions in the chat, and I'm gonna keep trying to keep up with them. All right. Now I organized these questions as they were coming in by what speaker was speaking at the moment. First one I have down here is for Eunah Cha by Alejandra Perez. She's asking, I'm curious of the process of moving to Canada. Did you need a visa to be pre-approved? What was the immigration process like? Was it for yourself only or immediate family too? And all these questions are for anyone that wants to jump in.
I can go first. So, do you need a visa to be pre-approved? Yeah, so I applied for my study permit while I was in Korea. And if you get it approved, at least when I did it, you pick it up at your first port of entry into Canada. And so my flight was from Korea to Vancouver to Edmonton. So when I got to Vancouver, I received my study permit there and then flew to Edmonton. When I did my study permit application, you had to show proof of finances, proof of enrollment into your university. And then there was like a $150 fee or something like that. And so that was the process for getting the study permit. And it was just for myself. At that time, there was no connection that I had to Canada. And so there was no way for me to immigrate my family. But that's something I'm looking into in the future now that I have my PR.
All right. Katie asks, how was the immigration process to Canada? Is there a type of work visa? And is it competitive?
I'm really interested in listening from Jazmin because I think, did you go from the States straight to Canada? Is that the case? Because I think for Eunah and myself, we self-deported back to our home countries and then flew to Canada, which is different because just depending on the country you are from, the restrictions are different, right? Because a few years ago, for Mexican nationals, we didn't need a visitor's visa. We could just go in with our passports. Now they changed that, and now they're looking back to changing it back again. Um, so it's just really different depending on the country you're coming from. But I'm not too sure how Jazmin was for her to go straight from the US to Canada.
So when I came to Canada, I didn't need a visa. It's back then, so I just needed the electronic travel authorization. I applied for the study permit from the US. So as soon as I got my acceptance letter for university, I submitted my study permit application. Um, for me, because I didn't need a visa, all that I needed was issued to me when the immigration officer was reviewing my application. So I never had to go to like a consulate. Once I got to the border, then that's where they issued me my official study permit. Up to that, I just had like the letter saying that I had been approved, but it wasn't an official document. I didn't experience anything different than a different international student applying from the US would have experienced beyond just, of course, the requirements that were specific to Mexican nationals.
All right. Now, Isadora Paul says, is your family with you in Canada as well? And she's asking that to Eunah Cha.
So my parents are not. They ended up self-deporting after I left. And so they're in Korea now. And my sister after high school came and did the whole route that I did with the study permit. So yeah, she's now applying for her PR as well.
Alondra Mateo asks, what was the process of going from student to resident?
I'll share like the very shortened version of it, but I kind of think of it as 4 steps. So you get your study permit, you do your undergrad degree or your master's degree, you go through your education, and then after that, you can apply for something called a post-graduation work permit. And so that allows you, after graduating, to work in Canada. And then when you work, you have to meet a certain number of hour requirements before you apply for your PR. So it basically goes study permit, post-graduation work permit, gain work experience, and then use that to then apply for PR. There's other pathways as well, but that's kind of the way that I did it.
Now, the one thing that I will add to that pathway is that once you finish school, you can only ask for that postgraduate permit once in your lifetime. So once you've done it, you've asked for it, but then you end up leaving, you can come back, even if you do another degree, and then ask for it again. So you must have your study permit, get your school, ask for that work permit, and then the next step would be the green card, like gain work experience, and then the green card. Otherwise, it's not gonna work.
Monica Martinez asks, did you face a bar when you self-deported, and have you been able to return to the US?
I can start with this one. Yes, I faced a 10-year bar. I am 3.5 years into that bar, so I have not returned to the US. I guess that was my short answer.
I left right before I turned 18, and we kind of did that timing on purpose. So my bar was 3 years, and I did go back, and I felt like it was such a cool experience, like going back to my high school, going back to my old house. Yeah, if you, Yasmin, once your 10 years is up, I highly recommend going back. It's just like a full circle moment that you feel so proud of yourself for.
I guess this is for Jazmin. So you have your PR now, right? So
Yeah.
even if you have your PR, because restrictions for permanent residents, Canadian permanent residents can come into the US without anything else, so long as you have a Canadian permanent resident. So does that not apply to you now that you have a PR? I mean, you still have that bar?
I spoke to a U.S. immigration lawyer, and what they told me is that no, even as a permanent resident, I can't go back to the US and as a citizen either, because when I try to go to the border, they'll know that I have a bar on file, and that they'll ask me to wait it out. So I'm still working with them to try to get all my FOIAs. They're pending. It's a really slow process, but I'm hoping that once they all come back, maybe there's a possibility for me to apply for a waiver as a citizen, but as a permanent resident, no, it doesn't seem like I have that option.
Interesting. That's good to know. Thank you.
Jose Acuna asks, how do you deal with the emotional aspects of self-deportation?
I think we kind of already answered that. The other thing that I would say now, it's if you can, if you're able to, go to therapy. It really helps. Other than that, it's just what everyone else has already shared on, the heaviness and emotional.
Fernando asks, ¿qué opinan sobre inmigrar con familia?
I think it's fantastic, but unfortunately, I think because I do get a lot of questions about immigrating with family, but it's really hard. I think it's best to travel on your own and then bring your family. Kind of like Eunah is kind of working on that now, right? She came there, now her sister, and potentially now her parents, right? I think that's like kind of the way of doing it.
This is for Eunah Cha from Jose Acuna. Are there specific provinces, places, or institutions you guys suggest?
To be honest, I don't know a lot of the other provinces in Canada. Of course, I'm biased, but I think University of Alberta, one thing that's really nice is they are very generous with their first year scholarships. So I didn't end up having to pay any tuition for first year, and I applied aggressively for scholarships every year after. And like I said, um, there are a lot of donors out there. You just gotta find the right ones and apply and apply.
What I would add to that you have to do a lot of searching, because it really depends on the school that you're applying to. Luckily for Eunah and myself, nursing, there's always money in nursing, right? Like if you look at all the universities, and that's a global thing, nursing brings the money in to the universities. And like if you go to University of Toronto, and nursing is like one of the top schools that brings the money into university. At U Alberta, the biggest one still is the engineering department, but nursing it's like right behind it. So I wouldn't say go to this school, go to this other school. I would suggest that you look into your programs and the reputation of the programs, and that will kind of give you a hint. Because if they have money, they'll give you scholarships, right? Like I know for PhD, University of Toronto, nursing school, and University of Alberta, they'll give you 15K just to get you started. But if you go to like MacEwan University or University of, whatever, they don't have that kind of money. At least not in nursing, right? So that's why I'm suggesting that you look at specifically into the programs that you want to go into.
Dana Cortez says, I am currently waiting for my bachelor's degree to arrive so I could apply to grad school in Canada. However, I am married to a US citizen. If I were to get a student visa, would I be able to bring my husband with? How would that process work for with a spouse?
Oh, like US citizens have no issues going to Canada. They don't even have to show anything. Unless they're gonna work, then it's a little bit different for them. But the process is like totally 100% simplified. Um, they won't have an issue. Like Canadians coming to the US is not an issue. US citizens going to Canada is not an issue. Everything gets pretty much equivalent. I saw a question too about if you are currently studying a degree and you want to transfer, luckily, most of the Canadian universities will take your credits if it's an unfinished degree.
Now these are for Jazmin, Jazmin Njera. I believe I'm saying that right. Am I saying that right?
Yes, Njera.
Perfect. Katie asks, how did you finally decide to take that big step? Moving to another country feels so big, not just physically, but feels like a loss of identity, self erasure in a way, rebuilding everything you know.
Yes, it was a very big decision for me. The end of undergrad is what really jump started that. Like, what am I gonna do after I graduate? What is my life gonna look like? And I just felt like I didn't see an end of my immigration status in sight, and I the weight of staying was heavier than the uncertainty of leaving. So even though I didn't know what was in store for me in Canada, or if I would even be able to stay, or if I would have to go back to Mexico, that was my choice to make and my opportunity to pursue. In the US, I feel because I was undocumented, I didn't have a choice. Like the choice was made for me. So knowing that I would have autonomy over my decision was what really drew me. And of course, there are all the things that pushed me to made me want to go, like the deportation of a family member, feeling like I was always constrained, not knowing what my life would look like, having to constantly live in fear of deportation. All of those things, they were heavy, but I just couldn't continue to live with that fear. And I feel like even people around me began to notice how I was changing year after year. I've always been described as like a bundle of sunshine and a really happy person. And I think year after year, I just became so sad, so heartbroken, and I just didn't like the person I was becoming. And I didn't want to wait and see what eventually that would do to me, looking at myself and being like 30 or 40 and regretting not having made a life-changing decision or taking a chance on myself. So there was a lot of things that eventually led to it.
Andrea, you have your hand up?
Yes, I have a quick question. I got this sent to me, but basically I heard that in New York you can apply for a visa to Canada. Is that a thing you guys have heard or know about? But this person is wondering if y'all know anything.
Sorry, you got cut off in that first part. I didn't hear who can apply for a visa?
So they're asking that you can apply for a visa from New York to go to Canada. Is that an actual thing, or do you guys know about that?
I personally don't know that New York specific one other than just like yeah, no, I don't know a New York specific one actually.
Okay, no worries. Don't
Like
worry.
people from
Thank
New
you.
York? No, that's
Yes.
weird. Sounds like a scam.
Yeah, I don't know. The question is in Spanish, pero se escucha que si aplicas desde Nueva York para una visa para Canadá te la pueden dar.
Oh, no. I don't know where she got that from. But
Okay.
usually it's the two ways, like the one way, like Eunah and Jazmin have done it, which is go to school there, and then there's a pathway to permanent residence. And then the other way, very popular, it's for professionals, and that's when the express entry. And the express entry is a merit-based, point-based something. So the more experience you have, if you have an undergrad, if you have a master's or a PhD, Like it's all points, and the more points you have, there's like a lottery thing that happens, and if you get selected, then you can apply and you go directly to get your permanent residency. So it's not as express as Canada makes it look like, but I mean, it's fairly easy, and we don't have anything like that in the US. And so that's another way of people who already have professional degrees to move to Canada as the express entry. And everyone that has already any type of degree should look into that. Of course, if you are in the health professions, I think, then you get extra points. Like anything that could gives you extra points, it's good.
Thank you so much. Matthew, you can continue. Sorry.
And we're continuing. Alejandra Perez says, I am wondering if you all have any insight for ways to immigrate that is not through being a student. I am pursuing a fully funded PhD right now and hope to finish here, so I'm curious about non-student pathways too.
I think that's just the one I mentioned now. If he's gonna have a PhD in the US, then he would be like 100% eligible for the express entry. I mean, there's other things that they take into account, but definitely your education, it's a big part of it.
Now, I believe that you three have talked about the cost of tuition, if I'm remembering correctly. Alejandra Perez also asks, can you share the price of housing and cost of living?
When I was in residence, the cheapest I'd ever had housing go was like $600 Canadian. I don't know exactly how much that is USD, but that's pretty 400 USD. Okay, yeah. And that was with like 3 roommates sharing one bathroom, one living room, like that kind of situation. And then cost of living, I think the only way I can really picture it is compared to other provinces is Canada, because I don't remember honestly in the States how much cost of living was like, but I would say in Edmonton it's more affordable compared to all the other bigger cities in Canada. I don't know if you others have insight on that. Yeah.
So again, I think I paid 1,200 for a basement. So it is kind of pricey. That's Canadian dollars. I think it's like 800 or 900 American dollars. So yeah, you definitely need a part-time job. And with a study permit, you can work up to 20 hours during the semester. And I think the summer you can work a little bit more. I don't know if that's changed, but yeah, the schools usually will hire you to do something. So
I had a similar experience. The cheapest place I ever found, and this was in a house with like 5, 6 girls, so we shared a bathroom too. Um, 675 for a room, shared house. Then after that, 1 bedroom was like 1250, utilities not included. And now where I live now, it's 1870, so definitely a lot more. Uh, it has it has varied significantly.
Jose Acuna asks, Jazmin, how did you share your decision to your parents? How did you explain it/deal with the backlash?
Ooh, that's a good question. So honestly, I waited. So at that point, it was just my mom. So I honestly waited until like my permit was approved, like I was ready to go, and then I broke the news to her just because I knew my mom wasn't going to be on board, and she wasn't. I mean, to this day, she still tells me to go back to the US, so she's not Team Canada by any means. And because I knew she was going to strongly disapprove of that decision, I didn't want to tell her in advance because I didn't want her to influence my decision. So once I was ready to go, it's when I told her. She was really angry, and I can understand why. And it was so hard for me to try not to feel super guilty, like I was betraying and almost doing my mom dirty, just because in a way I felt like my mom sacrificed so much to get me to the US and I was leaving. But now that I'm a little older and I like to say a little wiser, I like to say that I didn't waste her sacrifice. I didn't throw away her sacrifice. I just built on it. Like she set the foundation, she set the stepping stone, and had she not done all that for me, I wouldn't be where I am today. But it was really, really hard to tell her to break the news. She was not on board, and she's still not on board to this day.
David Noel is asking, just like Jazmin, I am considering a study permit as of right now. I'm in my second year of college, and I haven't received my AA yet. I actually have protective statute ending before getting AA, so I'm trying not to get 10-year bar. Can I get a study permit just to get a bachelor's degree and then get a PGWP? Are the PGWP open work permits, or do I have to work in a qualifying job?
I don't know the acronym what AA stands for, but post graduation work permit is an open type of work permit that's open, so it's not employer specific. You could, when I applied for a post graduation work permit, I didn't have a job yet, and then I could have left my employer and then moved to another company, and I would have still been okay. So it's open to any employer. In terms of getting a study permit for a bachelor's, a study permit, you could come to high school on a study permit, undergrad, grad, PhD. So the study permit is for most foreign nationals that are not Canadian. And they changed the requirement last year. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe that now only professional degrees for undergrad are eligible for the post-graduation work permit. Otherwise, it's just master's and PhD now.
Diana asks, what if your max is out in school or could apply for a second master's or PhD, but do you all know for a work permit using a master's degree?
I think this question is referring to like the post-graduation work permit, which if you already have an undergrad degree and you're coming to Canada with a study permit for a master's degree, you can use that post-graduation work permit. Again, it's only once in your life, right? So you would use it after your master's degree to work, gain experience, and then use that for your PR application.
All right. Now these questions have been logged under a Hignio. So Nayli asks, I am a registered nurse in Maryland. I have my license. I have not been able to officially practice as an RN. However, I am self-employed and work with individuals with special needs, and certain aspects of my job fall under RN role, which seems I could get RN permit in Alberta. I did apply to the Bridge to Canadian Nurses in Makiwan University and got accepted, as I do not know any other way to move to Canada besides study permit. I am in the process of applying for the study permit, and in terms of biometrics, I was wondering if anyone had trouble getting it done inside the States. While looking into the biometrics page in IRCC, it states, quote, only foreigners legally present in the US should go to ACS or VAS for biometrics. Or if you all have any other advice of how I can travel to Canada and work as an RN. I am from Peru.
Wait, is your RN from the States? And did that comment say whether this person has DACA or undocumented?
Nayli states that they are a registered nurse in Maryland and have their license.
But okay. Yeah, that's complicated because I don't know undocumented. Yeah. Oh, that's tough. Because I don't know if she's gonna be able to show up for the biometrics, given that she is in the States. But what I will say that in terms of the nursing, I don't know why she wants to go through the program at MacEwan University, because she can just get her license in Alberta. Although I will say that Ontario is really hungry for nurses. And so that's it's easier to move to get your RN license in Ontario than Alberta as an international person. So I would suggest to look into the board, since you're already doing it in Alberta, if that's where you want to go, then look into the Board of Nursing in Alberta. If not, then look into the Board of Nursing in Ontario. I don't think you need to do the bridge program because you were trained in the US.
Or can I speak?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, because you had a few questions and I wasn't sure if I should type it. But so I am undocumented. I graduated 2022 with my BSN and I got licensed 2 years after, so 2024. So I have my license in the state of Maryland. I have not officially practiced as an RN. And I did look into the Board of Nursing in Ontario and Alberta, but in order for me to get my license for both, I need to have work experience, RN work experience. And so for Ontario, um, it's so from what I saw, Alberta has like an option of what they consider work experience. It said self-employed, make sure you follow the health something. If your job involves some RN roles, then as long as you have 250 hours by September 30th, you will be able to get your license. And so right now I am in that tricky spot of like if certain aspects of my job would be considered RN role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the work experience is the only thing that's holding me back. Other than that, because I did receive my license and my bachelor's of nursing in the States, um, that is like great for me. It's just the work experience, which is so frustrating. That's the only thing.
Yeah, because I was gonna say the RN is just an easy transfer, but if that's the case, I would also maybe think about doing a graduate degree, like a master program. And I think that would be like the easiest, fastest way for you to move to Canada. And you can essentially start working as a research assistant in the school where you're doing your master's. And at least Alberta counts being a research assistant as nursing experience. Like research is considered as nursing practice, but not
Okay.
all of the provinces do that. I know Alberta does, but really look into that. I think that would be
Okay.
the fastest for you to move.
Yeah, I did have one more question. So you said that I could do my master's. However, from my understanding, I need to have a certain amount of hours of RN experience, like registered nurse experience.
That's only if you're doing a clinical master's, like an NP program. You wouldn't be able to enter the NP programs because that's true. You
Okay.
need clinical experience as an RN, but you can
Mm-hmm.
do an MSN that focus on leadership, and you don't need any experience as a nurse.
Okay. And so I would do the master's in nursing and go to Canada that way. And then and you're saying that the research within that would give me that RN work experience, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, and like I have a friend who just graduated her undergrad, did no research bedside experience, or sorry, no bedside clinical experience, and went straight into her master's. So yeah, it's possible to go, even if your experience doesn't count as like work experience, you may not even need it.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. And just about the biometrics, you all don't know if I could do it from inside the States. It seems like I would need to leave the States to do the biometrics.
I'm not sure the answer to that. I could only
Okay.
do it because I had DACA, but I'm
Thanks.
not sure.
Got it.
Jasmine,
Thanks.
Jasmine, did you have DACA too?
No, I didn't have DACA and I did do my biometrics from within the US. That was back in 2020. I am aware that now they have official disclaimers on the USCIS website stating that you do need to show proof of a status when doing your biometrics. Because of my social media platforms, I do speak to a lot of people one-on-ones, and a lot of them, that is their biggest concern. I can't say what will happen, but I've spoken to a lot of people who have gone to do their biometrics within the last 6 months, and that was their biggest fear. But none of the people who I've spoken to had a problem. They just have to present that letter telling them that they need to get their biometrics, their passport from their birth countries. For me, it was my Mexican passport, and then it's a really quick process. There's, of course, going to be the possibility that they could ask you for official proof, but it has not happened to me or to any of the people that I've spoken to. And that is for the LA center. I forgot what it's the visa application center. And then I did it in Milwaukee.
Maryland should be okay. I don't know about
Sorry,
Texas.
I hope so.
I wouldn't risk it in
Sorry.
Texas.
Sorry for the. Can I speak? Oh,
Yes, you can speak.
okay. For the biometrics, on my understanding, uh, is you don't need the fingerprints. The only is required your photo ID from your passport, and this through the culture brand because I did like 1.5 years ago. I don't have any problem with that.
Matthew, any other questions?
Yes. Sorry, having to catch back up.
If you guys have questions and would like to speak up, you can raise your hand and just ask them live. So we don't have to read them over, but if you guys would like to raise your hand and come on the screen.
I'm gonna read the last few. Yes, Diana. I also say that you have a question here. I'm gonna ask it right quick. How do you apply for school in Mexico and ask for a scholarship?
Oh, good question. So in the US, we have the National Institute of Health, and they give some scholarships. In Mexico, we have something it's equivalent, which is called the Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología. These are for masters, PhDs, and postdocs that you can apply for scholarships. Now, those are very competitive in the US and in Mexico. So you have to have a strong background. And of course, have a letter of acceptance of the university where you want to go. And in Canada, we also have the Canadian CI Institute of Health Research. And that also gives scholarships. So it's equivalent to NIH and CONACYT. And so those are really good places. I don't know much about like other majors, but health sciences, those three are the places where you want to go. And you really need to, like Eunah said, you need to seek those aggressively because then you won't have student loans.
All right. Katie asks, and this is to Dr. Fernandez Sanchez, what is your research about?
My research specifically is into HIV prevention and human trafficking prevention among different immigrant populations broadly. Yeah.
Rosario Christina Hever says, are folks able to petition their parents to travel with them?
I think we kind of like similar ideas in that it's best and easiest to do it yourself. And then once you are secure in Canada and stable, then it's easier to bring your parents. But I think trying to immigrate altogether presents like other challenges. And I don't know all the details and nuances to that.
Hosea Acuna asks, Jazmin, how did you share your decision with your parents? How did you explain it / deal with the backlash? I think you may have answered it earlier.
Yes. That- Yes, I'm pretty sure we covered that one earlier.
Okay. You uh, got the answer for that.
I'm so sorry, Matthew. You are cutting out really bad. We cannot hear you.
Okay. Oh, I'm back. Am I back?
We cannot
Hello?
hear you. That's okay.
Am I back?
That's okay. Yes. Hello? We can hear you.
Hello,
The
yes, I'm here.
clicking.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. You can hear me typing. I was about to start yelling in the chat. Okay. We have a few live questions here. In the comments, I'm gonna start reading those out, and this is under no particular order. And this is for anyone to answer. Gretel Rodriguez asks, any insights into the express entry process? I'm a DACA recipient with a master's degree looking into work/PhD.
Yes, Canada is waiting for you. So I think we touched on this, but anyone with a degree, a professional degree, Canada wants you. And there's the express entry. And again, I typed in a link there where it's like very easily explained. You know, the things that they consider when applying and how many points. I think there's a max of 600 points. And so the closer you get to 600 points, the closer you are to getting a PR based on the express entry. And so I can share it again. The younger candidates get more, a higher score, higher degrees get more points. Language proficiency, if you are bilingual in English and French, and you get more points. Your work experience in the US counts, but if you have Canadian work experience, it counts even more, so you get more points. If you have a job offer, you get more points. Those kind of things will get you more points. If you have a sibling in Canada, it gives you more points. So I like this page because it kind of explains to you, and you can kind of get your points together and see if you know, you would qualify. But most definitely, I mean, if you have a master's degree, you definitely qualify.
Monica asks, are the postgraduate student permits easy to get?
Of all my international friends who applied for post-graduation work permits, which was most of them, they've all gotten it. So I would say it's a pretty smooth process. If Canada is, has given you a study permit to stay here, they want to take advantage of that education and use your skills. So yeah.
Jose Acuna asks, when can you become a Canadian citizen?
I don't know the answer to that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Yasmin.
I was just gonna say for people that came to Canada as students and then post-graduation work permit, usually applying to citizenship um, as a permanent resident to citizenship it usually takes 3 years. But for people in our situation, we can count up to 1 year towards those 3 years, so 2 years after becoming a permanent resident. For me specifically, I became a permanent resident in May of last year, and I will be eligible to apply for citizenship next June.
I just want to know where the party is going to be at, so we can show up to your party.
For real.
Diana asks, I think earlier one of the speakers mentioned Norway. Is Norway an option for Mexican nationals?
That was me. The reason I was considering Norway is because back then they changed it, but back then they didn't charge tuition fees for international students. So as long as you could afford to move there, school was free. That's not the case anymore. That's the only reason I considered it back then.
Alondra Mateo asks, if we have questions about the process, are we able to contact a specific Canadian branch, or is there a Canadian immigration attorney you recommend?
I think this is a tricky question because you do have to do a bit of research on your own, and um, it does take some time, but I would stick to the government, like official government of Canada websites, and really try to figure out that way. Whenever you go through like other immigration services, sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes it's a scam. So, you know, I would stick to the official government of Canada websites. Oh, I'll also just mention a lot of schools have international student services as well. So if you're trying to apply for a study permit, have questions about specific, like, let's say you want to go to University of Alberta, look into their international student services. They have a lot of good resources as well.
Just for sake of time, we will just take 2 more questions. So if you have a really, really important question, please raise your hand. If not, Matthew will continue reading the last 2. But you can always find their social media. Liz has linked them. I don't know if you can send the message again so you can see their social media, and you can email them or text them. But yes.
I
Sorry,
have
Matthew.
a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I see all you guys. Basically, this is the basically my situation is I want to immigrate, but I have family, my wife and 2 kids, 2 princes, 10 and 7. So I talked to Jazmin 2 years ago. So basically, I just start doing everything that she told me. But this is I see you talking about like school and everything. My situation, again, I work as a project manager, and I just trying to uh know people, kind of know where I can be hired. I talked to a couple projects here on California, but it's just kind of that's why I'm here, just kind of have more idea. But always, like you guys, go out of school. I don't think it's gonna be my situation. So I just wonder if you can help me out with the, like just go there. Basically my situation, I sell everything thanks to Jazmin, house, cars, everything. So I got the little bit of savings so I can just move there. Don't worry about work. But I don't have a school. I just had 2 degrees, one on engineer and drafter and one on welder. So that's my situation. If you know something that it can help me out, like you say, I talk to lawyers, I pay them, 500, 300, and it's always the same response, just kind of way. Basically, I just want to move with my family. But again, it's just different than all the answers that I see here. So you guys have any friends who, I don't know, I just don't want to just make the transition without just kind of affect my family. Like I said, they born here, but my situation is weird because I cannot go back to Mexico because on a welder, I got more than 15 years of experience. They don't want me to go to Mexico. The government don't want me to go there. So basically I need to be here even if I'm illegal. So it's just kind of like a weird situation. So if you guys kind of respond, please help me out.
That's a really good question, especially because a lot of us have been talking about like studying to PR. There are ways without going through the studying route. I don't know them super well, but Fernando, I listed it in the chat. Especially with you having welding experience, I don't know if that falls into any of these 3 categories, but I would look into those 3 pathways that can eventually lead to PR without having to do study route.
Yeah, I also have quite a few. I know now a lot of people who have gotten their green cards in Canada. So maybe what I can do is just ask for a reliable attorney, a reliable immigration attorney that could maybe guide us into answering some of those questions. Because that's definitely a whole different situation. But I am sure there's something for you. But I will get back to you on that.
Yeah, like say you give me a name again, I just go on Instagram and I basically I pay lawyers from Instagram, and it's always money, but I never get an answer. Like I'm really just want to just go fly, start working, because again, I can just not go back to Mexico because I know how to do machines and all the stuff. So I cannot even go to Iran, Russia, all those places. But I'm just on that time that I just want to move Canada. You know, I can take vacation with my family to Italy, like Jazmin, you know, all these beautiful places. So that's basically my goal.
A
Couple
big
next year.
dream. Yeah, I think it'll
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, so East Texas Monarchs, we also partner with immigration attorneys, but US immigration attorneys. Currently we don't have we're not partnered with any Canadian immigration attorney, but we will look into that. And we'll look at, you know, things that honest immigration attorneys. So
Yeah, even the US attorneys, like I tried to talk to someone
oh
and
yeah, they don't know that. So don't
yeah.
pay US
No, but I'm
immigration.
talking about to fix my situation here and
Oh,
US.
okay.
And then
Yeah.
basically the answer is just go and out and you know, like basically trying to they can catch you and you can start fight your case. Believe me, I go to LA every week just to but you know, like I don't have the I just want to like you say, it's a bad dream. I just want to but again, I could just not go to Mexico just because of probably I ended up with uh a case. I don't know. It's just weird. California is weird. So
So we'll try our best to connect with someone from Canada, maybe an attorney or someone, and we'll get back to you. Send us an email so we can have your name in like your email to be able to reach out,
sure.
please. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you
Cool.
so much. And
Nice.
David, I see you have a question.
Yes, can you guys hear me? So I just wanted to say thank you guys for this webinar. I really appreciate it. I'm just gonna read from the post I posted on the chat. So once I get approved for the study permit, will I need like some sort of authorization to get into Canada? Or does it come with like the study permit?
That's a good question. I can't remember if I had to also just get like a electronic travel authorization or if that came with my study permit. It depends like where you're from and where your home passport is. I would just search on like a government of Canada website when you're searching like applying for your study permit. If your passport requires a visa to enter, but it is very possible that your study permit comes with it. I can't remember for sure if mine did though.
So
I think it's based on the country where you're from. So some countries will require the what is it called? ETA, and the study permit. So both things. And if you're from a different country, it will require a visa and the study permit. So two different things.
So I'm from Haiti. I'm still in the US. I'm under temporary protective status, which is being threatened all sorts of ways by Donald Trump right now. So I'm going to apply to some colleges in Canada. Hopefully I get approved. So will I be able to take like my US car into Canada and use it if I get approved for a study permit?
So at one point I did look into that because I was gonna take my Texas truck and it didn't work out, but it is possible. It is possible to do it, but it's just like, I don't know. I lived in Edmonton where Eunah lives and it's always snowing and I could never drive in the snow. So I decided to not have a car. But it is possible to take your car with you.
Okay. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Just one last thing. Thank you, Jazmin. I really appreciate all of your TikToks, your YouTube videos. They explained so much on the study permit, the explanation letters, everything. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Happy to help. I'm happy you find that useful, informative.
Thank you guys so much. Is there any last questions before we can, or well, before we leave? Seeing that there's none, Liz has already put in the chat all of our social media, everything, to reach out to them individually. And we will be posting this on YouTube in case you want to look back on it. But we truly do appreciate you guys coming and, you know, taking the time out of your day and listening to this. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a good night. Bye.